As some of you guys may know, I've been into the flight simulator stuff lately with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, and specifically lately picked up a VR headset just to play this game in VR. I knew it was going to be pretty demanding, and I know that my video card is not exactly a high-end video card, but I figured it would be okay on, lower medium settings in VR, but it turned out it wasn't. Basically, I could turn everything to the lowest settings, and it was still sometimes too choppy to really be playable. And it turns out it wasn't because of the video card, it was because of the CPU. This game in VR requires extremely high single-threaded performance. Basically, you need something like a Core i9 9900K or a Core i7 10700K, or, of course, one of the new Zen 3 processors. These have some of the highest single-threaded performance, some of the highest gaming performance that you're going to get from a modern CPU. So I needed to update. My Ryzen 2600, it seemed fine for most games. Obviously, anything prior to Zen 3 is a little bit of a bottleneck with games, but it usually isn't really that big of a deal unless you're playing really demanding games at really demanding settings. Right now stuff is expensive. Not just expensive, but in the case of the AMD processors, hard to find. Everyone knows video cards are hard to find right now. 30 series GeForce cards, 6000 series Radeon cards, basically impossible to find. And the same is true to almost the same degree with the 5000 series Ryzen processors. They came out at the end of 2020, and for the longest time, they were really hard to find, any of them. It's 2021 now. Things haven't really gotten any better. So I knew this was going to be expensive, but, what else are we going to do? We're not going anywhere. And I figured it's not going to get any cheaper anytime soon. So, you know what? I just went for it. This is the most money I've ever spent on a computer upgrade per part, I should say. The 5800X is the CPU I ended up buying, and that is the most amount of money that I've ever paid on any single computer part, ever. Even video cards. I've never spent as much on a video card as I've spent on this processor. So this was a lot of money, but so far it's been worth it. Let's just say that. So here we can see I got the Gigabyte Aorus B550 Pro AC. This is a mid-ranged full ATX motherboard based on the B550 chipset, which the B550 chipset in itself is a mid-range chipset. You've got the X570 above it, but I'm not really a big fan of the X570. I'm not a fan of the small cooling fans that are on those chipsets. Those small fans tend to fail, and I think in a few years' time we're going to maybe see a lot of those starting to have issues, and I'm not going to be pushing the PCI Express 4 bus nearly to its limit. I'm not even running a PCI Express 4 M.2, running a Western Digital Black. It's basically one of the best that you can do for PCI Express 3.0. It's about just over 3,400 megabytes per second. So I'm not going to be pushing the PCI Express 4 bus or really anything. I'm not overclocking or anything like that. I'm not running SLI, obviously. That's really one of the things on the X570 that you'll get that you won't get on a B550 is SLI support, which who really cares about SLI support anymore? So for me, the B550 board is fine, and that's the Ryzen 7 5800X, 8 cores, 16 threads, turbos up to 4.7 gigahertz, but even at the same clock speeds as the previous Zen 2 processors, these have a much higher IPC, or instructions per clock. They completely changed the way that the cache system works, and that's really where the single-threaded performance boost comes from, and the game performance boost. This processor did not come with a cooler, which is a little surprising because the 3800X and the 2800X previously all came with coolers. And this is now much more expensive. So this is the direct replacement for the 3800X. That one came with a nice factory stock CPU cooler. This one doesn't, even though they bumped the price up pretty significantly. But depending on how you look at it, they also bumped up the performance pretty significantly. Basically a 40% IPC boost, which is almost unheard of. In the world of CPUs, going from one generation to another, you might expect sometimes a 5 or 6 or 7% performance boost in IPC. A 40% gain is, again, almost unheard of. So for AMD, going from Zen 2 to Zen 3 is night and day. The board layout is pretty basic for a mid-range sort of full ATX, again, B550 chipset motherboard. So we've got two M.2 slots. I like the fact both of them have the metal heatsink on there. We've got metal reinforcements around the RAM slots and the main PCI Express card, which you're going to run, your heavy graphics card in, so that's nice to see. But otherwise, it's pretty much a standard mid-size board. It's very standard for a B550 motherboard. It does have a pretty nice looking audio section on it. We've got a metal shield over the audio chip, which most mid-range boards have. And it's got those red polymer capacitors, which are apparently supposed to help with audio. So the audio section looks pretty decent. But what I really loved about this motherboard, compared to most B550 boards in general, most full ATX motherboards in general, is that this has a lot of USB ports on the back. 12. Actually got 12 USB ports on the back. 11 of them are Type A. The 12th one is a Type C. But that's really nice because I actually do use a lot of USB ports. I'm pretty much using most of those up. So it's nice to have a lot of USB ports on the motherboard. This has more than most B550 boards. Really, this has more than most motherboards in general. Other than that, pretty standard back here. We got a 2.5 gigabit LAN. We got 8-channel audio with optical. And we got 2 antennas, as you can see there, for Wi-Fi. This motherboard, as the AC nomenclature would imply, has built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. I don't necessarily use the Wi-Fi, but I do use the Bluetooth. So, hey, it's a nice bonus that this motherboard has it. This motherboard was actually on sale for about $230 Canadian. Which is a really good price, I think, for what this board has. Came with a lot of accessories, stickers, cable ties, the antennas for the Wi-Fi, and there's the Ryzen 5800X mounted on the motherboard. Again, it doesn't come with a stock cooler. For me, this actually didn't matter. I'm just using a Cooler Master 212 with a Noctua fan on it. And there it is all put back together. It doesn't look any different than when we started. Again, we didn't change the case, we didn't change the CPU cooler, we didn't change the graphics card. So at a glance, really nothing looks like it's changed. Even the RAM, I went from G.Skill Ripjaw 16 gigs at 3000 megahertz to G.Skill Ripjaw 32 gigabytes at 3600 megahertz. So we did upgrade the RAM, but it was G.Skill Ripjaw 5 in red before, and it's G.Skill Ripjaw 5 in red after. So again, looking at it, it actually doesn't look any different. The RAM looks like it hasn't changed, but it has. And there's the BIOS posting for the first time. We can see the motherboard revision, the BIOS version, which I did update. It's got the latest BIOS update on there as of the time of building it. The 5800X, of course, and 32 gigs of RAM. And again, that's running at 3600 megahertz. And so back to Microsoft Flight Simulator in VR. Was it worth it? Did it make a difference? Yes, it made a huge difference. Really night and day. Again, before I would turn everything down to the lowest settings, and it was still unplayable. It was very choppy. It would sometimes cause a lot of stutter, and in VR, that is very bad. It's very disorientating, makes you feel sick pretty quick. It was really just unplayable most of the time. In a really, really basic city with not a lot of buildings, it could be done. But in any city, like right now we're in London, England, it was basically unplayable, even on low. Now we're on medium settings, which doesn't sound like a huge difference, but in Microsoft Flight Simulator, the difference between low graphics settings and medium graphics settings is actually substantial. It's instantly noticeable, quite a difference. It basically looks like a potato on low. And so going from low to medium alone was a huge difference, but it's running much, much smoother even on medium than it was on low. And again, we didn't change the graphics card. This is a AMD Radeon 5600 XT, 6 gigabyte. Again, it's a mid-range graphics card at best. It is not a high-end graphics card. And we've seen a huge, huge performance gain here without changing the graphics card. So basically the CPU was a bottleneck, and now it's not. Of course, it's not just in Flight Simulator. We've noticed a speed difference. Again, I'm running a M.2 drive, Western Digital Black SN750 that runs at just over 3,400 megabytes per second. I think it's about 420K IOPS. It's a pretty fast M.2 drive. Again, considering it's PCI Express 3.0, not 4.0. And on the 2600, I actually really didn't notice much of a difference going to the faster SSD drive, but now everything's faster. Windows boots up faster. We have programs like GIMP that load up a lot faster, and the video editing I'm doing in DaVinci is a lot faster. So, but overall, the computer's definitely noticeably faster. Booting up and loading up programs, again, GIMP and Steam and things like that load up much quicker. But really, it was for VR. It was for Flight Simulator, in VR specifically, and it made a huge difference there, night and day. So it was an expensive upgrade, but it was worth it, and I should have this processor for quite a long time.